I think now we can go into the more interesting aspects. I think here very important would be to understand performance management as a process. The cycle of performance management, we go into this. One very basic question could be such as, how should performance management be designed to have a positive effect on everybody involved? So the performance management includes multiple actors. Here you have the raters, they are very often the managers or supervisors, and then the employees or subordinates. And this process should be beneficial for all involved parties, not just only for the person who's being evaluated or the person who is rating. So we can have here an overview of performance management process. Now also it's a cycle. You can see here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it goes back. And it's repeating cycle. So there are different ways how to illustrate performance management. Here we have just sequential and then also a cycle. And as you can all already see, it's a cycle. Also, we have interventions in between. Right? And it's not always fully sequential. There's also sometimes some kind of overlap. At the very beginning, probably would start with job design. When we talked about staffing. A part of staffing, we also talked about job design. You have a design a job, you clarify the job, and then you try to fill. We talked about recruitment and selection. And then here in terms of performance management, then we would go to the next step. You would set performance goals. What are the objectives the employees should fulfill? Is it sales growth, 10% sales growth, lower defect rates, lower this and that, higher this and that, more better client relationship, higher customer satisfaction, and so forth. That varies depending on the job design. Here you have performance goals that will be set. Then employees would start to work. Well, they don't start, they continuously work, but in this cycle, at least in this simplified scheme, you have the early phase. Then you receive feedback. That's the idea, continuously performance management, not just once in a while, but ideally continuously. It will be monitored, and then you conduct a performance appraisal, the more formal one, maybe once a year, every 6 months. It varies quite substantially across countries, across companies, and also about job profiles. And then the cycle would start again. At each step, you would think, there's some kind of a misalignment, and then there could be some training. The manager could be trained, the employees could be trained, or also if poor performance, then you can reconsider staffing. So there are all kinds of mechanisms, interventions in between, all in all to achieve performance. So that's the overview of a performance management process or a performance management cycle, you may say. Let us look into some of these steps in more detail. Start with job design. Here I don't want to go so much into detail. We talked about job design in our session on staffing. So that's somewhat repetitive. Nevertheless, I think typically if you have a job design, you have a job description, then you would clarify what are the tasks to be completed. If it's a sales agent, if you think of foreign companies and they run foreign subsidiaries. Very often these foreign subsidiaries has the purpose of selling products and services in a foreign market. The subsidiary might be also much smaller than the large multinational. So very often you have sales engineers, if it's a German company selling machinery products, let's say in Asia, so they have many sales engineers, so they have to sell products, they have to advise clients on their products. They have also, if in that case they need to have an engineering background, technical expertise, and so forth. You will specify also what kind of work interactions they have internally, also externally, with which customers they're supposed to communicate and to deal with, respond to, maybe prioritize then also different customers. And then also very important, reporting relationships. In this international context, you can think of reporting relationships immediately, immediate supervisor and so forth, but also internationally. Foreign subsidiary, very often you have a direct reporting line internally in the foreign subsidiary, but also very often you have reporting lines back to the headquarters. And that should also be specified in such a job design. And then, of course, you have performance expectations that are being set already in the job design description. here for performance management, what is very important are goals, or goal setting, or here performance goal settings. Here, I think interesting point is also here we have agreed on performance goals. Of course, management, they would identify and set certain goals. But I think for the past, let's say, 1 or 2 decades, there's also different thinking. That's not only being directed from top to bottom, but at the same time also that the employees, they also have to agree on goals and to have also say and to realign or adjust certain goals. In particular also in this multinational context, that's very important to find some kind of agreement. Because the aspect is that the goals of the headquarters cannot always be achieved in a certain local context. Because we have different regulations, different market environments, and that necessitates some kind of adjustment. Very simple. If the corporate headquarters says, oh, we want to grow by 10%, that is meant 10% for the whole, for the whole organization, but it may be unrealistic to expect 10% growth in some shrinking markets. It's very obviously, we have different growth rates across different countries. In the past, China had double-digit growth, 10% growth rates. And if nowadays it's very different. Nowadays, maybe we have single low growth rates, maybe 3%, maybe depends, maybe even less. And then if headquarters says, oh yeah, you're the new expat manager for China. In the past, your predecessor, he achieved 10% growth rates. So now you have to do 12% or 11%, even more than that. Completely unrealistic. I mean, for now, if we talk about this, seems super obvious. But that needs to be also then specified and discussed and agreed upon so that you set realistic goals. To what extent realistic or maybe even stretch goals. I think that's also very much corporate policies. Because we know in some countries, I used to work also in Korea many years, they have very ambitious goals. And I think they benchmarked General Electric. Maybe you know General Electric at some point used to be the most famous, the most successful company in the world, and everyone wanted to be as successful as General Electric. And General Electric was very famous for stretch goals, meaning stretch a lot. So you have to really reach very high, really far. That was the idea. And almost like a miracle, very often General Electric really achieved these really ambitious goals. If you set ambitious goals, you reach really hard and you really put in lots of efforts. That's the typical American approach, very ambitious stretch goals. And Korea, oh yeah, we learned from them, we also set really high stretch goals. But they set stretch goals, they were not within reach. They were maybe up in the ceiling, can't reach. But somehow everyone knew that. This is an unrealistic, ideal dream kind of goal, and fine. But then your Korean company employs a German manager, and German manager sees, oh, this is the goal we are supposed to achieve. It's nonsense. It's impossible. In this Korean context, everyone knows it's a very ambitious goal. Maybe in 20, 30 years we achieve it, but not in the next few years. And there's some kind of alignment. But if you think of performance management, also the goals, they're aligned, also attached to certain pay for performance, promotion, and so forth. And there's a clear mismatch. Within this Korean context, that's fine. But if you then cross borders, that can lead to all kinds of misunderstandings. So goal setting is extremely important because that determines also the evaluation later on. So that's important. And so some of the general guidelines here for achieving some kind of alignment, setting realistic goals, but at the same time also ambitious, but not overly ambitious. And there should be also some kind of clear communication, and some kind of agreement between the people who are setting the goals and then those who are signing on or agreeing to accept these goals. Not easy. We'll talk also about some cultural adjustment, how this should be considered when setting these goals. Then we come to the next aspect, stage 2 or stage 3 actually in this performance management cycle. So the idea is the employees, manager employee, they agreed on certain performance goals, and then employee starts to work. Of course, it doesn't start suddenly. It has been working all the time. But if we try to make it in a phase model, so just considering the beginning after some kind of agreement. And I think here the main idea here is really that we have it's an ongoing process. So performance management and performance appraisal does not only take place once a year. So many organizations, they do annual performance reviews. So where the manager sits down with the employees and then discusses the performance from the previous year. Very formalized. But much earlier, before that, you have a continuous feedback. So employees and managers, they communicate regularly. And I think that's also very obvious, you would say. But very often it doesn't take place so much, but it should be encouraged more, because nowadays the role of leaders, of managers have changed. In the past, you're a manager, you're a leader, you're a very high position, and then you have the other people who just do their things. There's not so much interaction. Now a leader or a manager is very often also a coach and a trainer. So through daily and interactions with employees, trying to develop employees to work towards the goals, achieve performance. It's an ongoing process. So leaders or managers equals at the same time also trainer or coach, or that's the idea as it should be, what we consider under HR management nowadays. So we have ongoing assistance, support, redirection, feedback, maybe also some kind of readjustment of goals when being realized not possible. And then also positive feedback. Oh yes, you did as well. Continue. And that's the main idea. And if needed, also some kind of correction. Not easy. So in a sense, a lot of HR, what has been traditional HR functions such as training, has been delegated to managers. So meaning the role of managers has been enlarged. So as not only a person who gives some directions, but also who coaches and trains employees. And that's a general trend in most countries for the last 10, 20 years. Then we talk about the next aspect, not so different from the previous ones. It's also to observing, coaching, and training, but also at the same time also monitoring or evaluating. To what extent employees doing their jobs well. And then even before performance evaluations take place, we need to evaluate and monitor. And very often, if you think of international business, you have a lot of project workers. So you have global projects, short-term projects, and all kinds of assignments. And if the managers can detect performance is not doing well, then consider some readjustments. That sounds maybe a bit harsh, but if it's an important project, then there are different ways what managers can do. Of course, the first step before when they notice a project is falling behind schedule, their difficulties, would be the communication, discussion with the employees. And maybe also offer some training, some advice, some feedback how employees can do it better. But if that happens once or twice and still there's no improvement, then there's some thinking to what extent that employee can be kept in the position. Or there's some kind of readjustment of the position. So that means also it's initiated by the manager, then maybe some reassignment, meaning it could be the job instead of enlargement, it could be a more narrowing of the job, a more simple task. Could also be demotion, could be a transfer, or in worst case, after several repeated warnings and so forth, then also considering termination or layoff. So I think that's also part of continuous performance management, really check the performance and then also consider staffing, different types of staffing or training then to counter all kinds of deficiencies in performance. Yeah, so that is, as I mentioned before, also the sensitive part of performance management. It may cut pay performance, it may cut compensation, and it may also have consequences for staffing. So let us briefly talk about the performance appraisal itself. So that's probably one of the core elements of performance management, and most people, if they hear performance management, they think of performance appraisal. Yeah, performance appraisal is one part of it within the cycle of performance management, job design, goal setting, feedback, yeah, and then eventually we have performance appraisals. So the frequency varies very often across companies, industries, and so forth. It is fairly common that companies offer at least once a year performance appraisal, every 12 months, or end of fiscal year within a certain time frame. Managers have to conduct performance appraisal with employees. In some industries, I used to work in a consulting company. After each project, you have a performance appraisal. And the project can last from 3 months to 12 months, but very often 3 months to 6 months is a typical length. And after each project, you evaluate. You have an evaluation, and based on the evaluation, as they say in American companies, up or out. But anyway, it depends on the frequency. So the performance appraisal is a formal procedure, and typically, we'll talk more about this later on. You will collect all kinds of information from subordinates or the boss ratings, maybe customer ratings. Maybe you have a very detailed script and criteria how employees are evaluated. And then you have the meeting where then the manager, very often the manager, in some cases also maybe HR manager and the employee will sit together and discuss the performance. Typically this happens in person. You meet in a meeting room, you're secluded, separated, no interruption, because it can be a very important discussion, a very important meeting. The idea is also that it's not only that the rater, the supervisor talks to the employee, but also it's a two-way, some kind of communication. Ideally, that should not be a surprise, because there should have been a lot of communication, feedback loops before this formal performance appraisal. This evaluation determines also the future career of employees. But of course, there are sequential, many performance evaluations which form then the basis for pay and promotion, career development. And also it forms the basis of training interventions or opportunities. Because based on the performance evaluation, then it becomes clear the strengths and the weaknesses of employees, and then what can be done to improve the situation. In international business, very often also we would think also of international career dimensions, to what extent these employees are able to deal on a global basis. Have they been working on global assignments, global projects, to what extent they're successful, and they have potential maybe then also to enter these global talent pools, or maybe then also be assigned internationally, maybe not now, but in the future. Just one example of performance management, some problems and difficulties, because it's a performance management system. There's also undergoing change, trying to improve. Here's just one example. Cargill is a US-based company in the agriculture and food industry. And this company also experienced some difficulties. I think here in this company's problem was there was a disconnection between performance management process and daily work. So we talked also here about how performance management nowadays, it's supposed to be not just a once in a year thing, but a continuous process. And also managers here were reluctant to give feedback, particularly honest feedback. That's also very often a problem in multinational corporations. They introduce all kinds of performance systems, but they're not really implemented well. So the idea was to establish goals become more agile. We talked about agility, strategic agility. One of the keywords in business, also in international business. At the same time, also reducing complexity, because these performance management systems in some companies are highly complex, and they have really long surveys for each employee or stakeholder in the evaluation system, and that can be simplified. And then one of the goals here from Cargill was also to increase alignment of performance management with organizational strategy. So what they did then, that's already some time ago, they created everyday performance management. So the goal is then to have continuous everyday performance management system instead of annual appraisal, so continuously, frequently. And they try to focus on the positive aspects. And that's, of course, also important, developmental, and also easier to communicate. And the idea was also to have daily conversations, also talking, oh, today you did this and that well, and trying really to establish trust, and in establishing this kind of feedback culture. And by doing so, also they could reduce the complexity of these highly formalized annual performance ratings. And then, of course, they evaluated the new program, and they also showed that was fairly successful in doing that. So seeing that some of objectives, goals of the overall company, and how they can also change performance management systems.